And we're go, guys. I'm gonna turn off my microphone.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's Becca here with Emma.
Hi.
So this is going to be a live video, and we're recording, so we will post this up later if you don't have time to stick around for the whole thing. While you're watching, if you have a question, leave it in the comments section on the YouTube page, and it will be passed along to us, and we will answer it.
Yep. So we'll give people a couple more minutes to gather, and we'll start shortly.
Awesome. It's officially noon Central Time where I am. So just to remind everyone, this week we're focusing on how to write goals, how to prioritize, and how to build out a roadmap. So Emma and I thought it would be really great to come back to this idea of SMART goals, which is something we kind of breezed by in the lectures, and really dig into what it means to write a SMART goal or a SMARTY goal. If you want to also include being inclusive and equitable in your goals, which you should always do. It's great. I'm going to let Emma take it from here and kind of walk you guys through this awesome presentation that she put together. And if you have any questions about this topic or anything else that's come up this week or last week, again, just drop it in the comment section on YouTube and we'll take a minute and talk about that.
Awesome. So we're going to go pretty quick through these so that there's plenty of time for everyone's questions at the end. But I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen and we'll go from here. So this is SMART goals. So SMART goals start with the big picture, right? So you really want to think about what is your vision of success? What do you want to transform or create or change? Like, what does success look like at the highest level? So if you're following along and doing this exercise live with us, you could go ahead and write that down. Or if you're catching up and going through the video non-live, you're welcome to go through the exercise in the video on your own speed or kind of as you watch. So what is your vision for this goal? What do you hope it looks like in a year? What does success feel like? How do you know you've been successful? Things like that. That all goes into your vision. What does it feel like? Who knows about it? Who did you tell first? How are you celebrating your success? So then SMART goals come into the picture, right? And so the SMART and SMARTY goals framework allows you to set goals that are more realistic, measurable, and very specific so that you are more likely to be successful. So again, stay accountable, be realistic, and achieve your vision, right? So one vision might have several SMART goals, or several SMART goals might be related to each other. So the S stands for specific. Be specific about what you're trying to achieve. So for example, I want to save more of my paycheck to build up a rainy day fund. So the questions you'll want to ask yourself when defining your specificity is, what do I want to accomplish? Why is this goal important to me? Who is involved? Where is it located? And which resources are involved? This will help you get a better sense of the details around your goal and your vision. The M stands for measurable. How will you know whether or not you have been successful? So if we want to keep going with the example about the rainy day fund, I want to save enough money to cover my rent, utilities, and living expenses for 6 months. So that puts a fixed amount on the goal and a timeline. So how much, how many, how often, and how will I know when I've been successful? How will you know when you've crossed that finish line? Is it a monetary figure? Is it a date? Is it any other metric you could be using? But how will you know when you've reached the end of your journey? The A stands for achievable. So, what is realistic given the current conditions under which you exist? This is a pretty broad question, I understand. But so, think about what makes this goal possible. I can set aside 4% of my paycheck each month toward this goal. So the questions you'll want to ask yourself when looking at the accomplish section is, how can I accomplish this goal? How realistic is the goal based on other constraints, such as financial factors? And where are my limitations and boundaries? Where are your kind of edge cases, right? Like we say that a lot in product. What are the edge cases? What are those unlikely to happen but possible fringe scenarios that you might want to look at and examine? R. So how does R stands for relevant? How does each goal support your overall vision? So go back to that vision that you wrote down in the beginning of this exercise. So if you build up a rainy day fund, you don't have to worry about financial security if you lose your job. So that's what makes this goal relevant. Does this seem worthwhile? Is this the right time? Does this match your other efforts and needs? Are you the right person to reach this goal? And why would you prioritize this goal over something else? The T stands for time bound. And so this is where you put, you go back and you use time boxing, right? And you say, how long will it take you to achieve this goal? So what deadline will you set for yourself? In 6 months, I will have saved $10,000. So you want to ask yourself, when will this happen? What can I do 6 months from now? What can I do 6 weeks from now? And what can I do today? The I and E stand for inclusion and equity. And so how does your goal address inclusion and equity? These are a newer abbreviations that have been added to SMART goals to make them more diverse, inclusive, and equitable. And so the example that we used here is if you wanted to throw a successful conference with X number of attendees, but you also want to assure that 50% of the panelists are people of color. That's how you could include the I and the E with your SMART goals. So that is the exercise. Let's see. I'm going to, we'll make these slides available, I guess, in the course materials. So don't feel like you had to write everything down super, super fast. We'll make the slides available as a PDF in the course module and on the website.
Thanks, Emma. That was really great. If anyone has questions, again, don't be shy about typing them into the comments on YouTube and we'll answer them. One thing that you might have noticed as Emma was going through this is that in the lecture, I used a different letter or different words for A and R. I used ambitious and realistic. I think there are a few different ways to do these SMART goal acronyms, but they're all the same thing, really. Like the idea is that you want something that is specific, measurable, that really can identify that vision of success that you have. It's either ambitious and relevant, but also achievable and realistic. Like it's actually something that you can do. And that's part of why you want to put a time frame on it and you want to put a number on it, because you want to make sure that you're balancing your ambition with realism and giving yourself like something that you can actually work towards. One of like the really common examples of like the difference between a regular goal and a SMART goal is like every year people are like, I want to lose weight. But just saying you want to lose weight doesn't really give you an action plan for how you're going to do that. A better goal would be, I'm going to lose 5 pounds in 4 weeks by maintaining a regular exercise routine and eating healthy every day. That's the idea of a SMART goal, because it kind of gives you a path to success in the way that you've thought through what the goal is and made it very specific. In newsrooms, there are lots of ways that you can use SMART goals. Emma, what are some of the ways that you've used SMART goals in projects and products that you've worked on in your newsrooms?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think that well, I used SMART goals when I was looking to transition out of my newsroom role into a product role. And so my vision was to transform my job, right? And change from being an assistant managing editor to being a product manager at the same organization. And so for me, I built up my SMART goals around projects that I wanted to accomplish, around milestones that I wanted to meet toward making this job transition. I knew that if it wasn't going to work out within a year or so, I would look for a different company to have the same opportunity and things like that. I think you can also use them for launching new initiatives, right? Like if you're launching a new membership program or you're launching a new newsletter, you can use SMART goals to just help measure success and remind people to stay accountable.
Yeah, that's a great point. I also think you can use them just when you're putting together like a big feature or story, saying like, who do you want to reach? How much effort are we putting into this project, and what does success look like? Are we going to have an impact on the community? Like people are going to do things like that. We have gotten a question. So Jenny Romney asks, how do you get buy-in on your goals, specifically team goals? I've tried setting goals with my team, but sometimes it feels like I'm babysitting even though we've set them together. That's a really great point. Emma, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, interesting. I think that one thing you can do is sometimes the A stands for accountable. And so when the A stands for accountable, you often factor in things like who's going to be held accountable for these goals when we meet them and our milestones. The other way I think to get buy-in is to celebrate your milestones so that when you reach the first 100 subscribers or you get the first 10,000 people on your newsletter list, you are bringing in, whether it's bringing in a cake and balloons or you're doing something fun that requires the everyone on the team to celebrate together so that they feel like they're part of it. And then it's also, I think, about giving like public shout outs and validation to folks on your team.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Celebration and giving people kudos is huge. I think one traditional way that I've done this is with the responsibility matrix is when you do have projects, you assign who is either in the driver's seat and is responsible or accountable for that. And then you give them a platform or a place to talk about their progress so that you can celebrate them with the team. So that could be like a weekly meeting where everyone gives updates on their progress towards the goal. And then you celebrate together, things like that, like Emma was saying too. We have another question. So Cecilia Tintle asks, how can I break from the, oh, I'm so tired, full of stuff to do cycle in my team? How do we convince them to actually take a break and sit down to plan? It's like a vicious cycle sometimes. Yes, it is. I think we've all felt the pressure of being in a newsroom and it just seeming like the news never ends. So how do you find the time to step back and think about that big picture? It's definitely hard. I think the biggest thing that you should do is like give yourself and your team room. Like let people know that some things can fall and that's okay. Like it's okay to say no to certain things. It's okay to start to prioritize and say like we can't do that. It starts like from the top, right? Like if I expect the people below me to feel like they can have the confidence and authority to say no when they're overwhelmed by too much work that's like urgent, then I need to be able to step up and say no for them at least a few times so that they're comfortable saying no. Emma, do you have thoughts on this as well or any ideas?
I think using your data to help you decide what you can stop doing is really helpful. And so whether it's we're going to post less to Facebook because Facebook is increasingly a much smaller portion of our referral pie. So that frees up someone on the social media team to help do some goal setting around what other new platforms we want to look into.
Yeah, definitely. I think also like scheduling time and just kind of making it a thing where everyone sits down and talks about what they're doing and you either use the urgent and important matrix or the effort impact matrix that we talk about in the prioritization video. Like use that as like a physical tool for having a conversation on what's really important. And you can bring the data into that conversation, right? Like if you go into that conversation armed and know that Facebook isn't performing very well or Twitter isn't performing really well, and you're using all of this manpower on posting daily, we can talk about like why you're putting that effort in. Those can really help start the conversation, but it really is just a matter of setting new standards for what work should be done. Kevin asked another question. My organization is struggling a bit transitioning from prototyping with the digital team to operationalizing projects. How can SMART goals help? Oh, this is great. Emma, do you want to jump in here first?
Sure. I think that, so the way that I'm understanding this question is that the organization is struggling from saying like, hey, here's like our proof of concept on the digital team, and then how do we scale the project across the organization? And so I think that this goes back to sort of the building your case that we talked about last week, right? And so have you done your cross-departmental validation and shown that prototype or that proof of concept to another department to explain to them how it's going to work or how it's going to benefit them? So you can use SMART goals to help build your case, right? So if you are putting together some SMART goals about that support the prototype or the proof of concept that you built, then you can use that information to build your case in your pitch document or as you kind of pitch your higher ups. What do you think, Becca?
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea. I also think having a conversation where you bring people together, like if let's say you have a prototype of a new newsletter that you're building or that you want to build, but you know that there's like editorial people that will need to be involved with actually publishing this newsletter on a daily basis, or there's a revenue team that's going to have to sell sponsorships and ads on a regular basis and make sure that those are connected to the product. It would be good to bring all those stakeholders to the table and write the SMART goal together. So you know, or at least a handful of objectives and SMART goals together. So you know, like once you take this prototype into operation, what this success will look like and how it will change. Because the people who produce and populate a product are also users, they're also stakeholders in what success looks like. So you need to take their needs into account. It's good to have them at the table for those conversations. So you're thinking about big picture, what our outside impact is, and internally, how this is going to work within our organization. So Kevin says, we built the case with senior management, but managers with human resources have been resistant to dedicate staff. Yeah, that can be hard. I mean, you have to get the senior management on your team to convince managers to actually help, or you need to involve the people who are resistant to dedicate their staff and kind of start to understand, like, why are they resistant? Is it because they have way too much on their plates already? Like, how can you get them to buy into this as much as everyone else by making it something that serves their needs as well, or by addressing other needs that they have, kind of figuring out like how to move the puzzle pieces to make it something that's actually going to work. I think one of the hardest parts about being a product manager is that you often don't really have the authority to tell people what to do, and so you need to convince them that it's the right thing for their team, for them, and for the organization at large. And like, by doing the work of convincing them, you also have to build the case that it is worth doing, right? You need to prove over and over again that you really are going in the right direction. So it's good because it does kind of hold you into account as well, about how this fits into the overall mission or thing of your organization.
That segues really well into the next question from Mike. How do you convince upper management to embrace SMART goals and OKR thinking when you are not the person in charge of a newsroom? And this kind of gets to just what Becca was just saying, right? Is you really have to use everything at your disposal to be convincing and to be persuasive. I can tell you for sure, like one thing that I had to really, really work on when I moved to product management from the journalism side was my persuasive writing, right? Like the same way that you like did like a persuasive essay in high school, that was like not a skill that came naturally to me. And so it's everything that you do, from like your drive-bys in the newsroom. Who do you pop by and show something cool, just like a little taste of it, to see like, hey, I've got a sneak peek. Like, how do you build up suspense and excitement around what you're working on, so that when people get an assignment from you, they are more likely to do it.
Yeah, convincing people is the hardest part. Like, I think I recently read an article about people who are the glue in their organization, who do a lot of the emotional work and project management work. And a lot of being a product manager is being the glue and being the connector between departments and things. And that can be really frustrating. It's not necessarily the right role for everyone, because you're in a leadership position without a lot of authority and power that most leaders have, and you end up acting as a facilitator. So it's good to talk to your manager when you feel like you're taking on this work, and make sure that your manager and the people above you acknowledge and respect this work that you're doing and can reward you for it, or think about how it fits into the larger organization. If you feel like your managers don't understand the need for this work, then you should consider, why you want to take it on. There's another question from Jenny. Do you have advice on getting top leaders to define more specific KPIs instead of something like have influence in the community?
Ooh, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
I think always push back, right? And say, like, how are we going to measure that? Like, impact is really hard to measure, but like, what are some ways you could measure influence, right? Is it voter turnout? Is it voter registration numbers? Is it, attendance at local school board meetings? Is there something that you can quantify and show over time? And if they really don't have a metric, then you should introduce them to SMART goals and help them, give them frameworks, right? Like, they may be new to this as well. And so give them the frameworks that you're learning in this class to help them be more accountable to their goals and their vision.
Yeah, at Chalkbeat, we have a whole system that we use for tracking our impact. And there's two main categories that we look at, which is informed action and informed debate, which is essentially to say, like, informed debate could be our work of reporting is cited in a report or research analysis, or someone brings up our reporting at a school board meeting or during a legislative committee hearing. Informed action is when things actually come as a result of our reporting, like maybe a lawmaker puts up a new bill to tackle an issue that we've reported on and cites our reporting, or someone uses our reporting in a lawsuit. Things like that that we can actually measure. And we log all of these things in essentially a really fancy spreadsheet. But we keep track of it, and that way we can actually measure the influence in our community. I think it's good to have those conversations on the front end of really large editorial projects. So let's say someone is coming to you with a big idea of, I want to do this investigation. I see that there's corruption, or this person is a bad actor in the community, or there's this problem that's causing blah, blah, XYZ impacts on the community, and we really need to expose it. In that initial pitch conversation, talking to them about what is the impact that you want to have, or the influence you want to have on the community through this work, and having the conversation specifically at that stage can then help you measure it in the end and set a specific goal about what you were trying to accomplish. And that's hard with leaders sometimes, because they're also very busy.
Cool. Does anybody else have any last minute questions? Anything that's not related to SMART goals? How's it going out there? Cool.
Awesome. Well, I think we can give it maybe one more minute, see if anything else comes in, and then Emma and I will both be available in the discussion forums. So please start jumping in. If you would if you have an idea of like a project that you're working on now where you think it really needs a SMART goal, feel free to kind of jump into the discussion forum and start posting that. It looks like we have
Emotional
more
work.
questions.
Yeah, emotional work historically has fallen to women in newsrooms, unfortunately, and so I think that both of us have experienced that happening to us in our various newsrooms. I can't say that I've dealt with it particularly well. I'm like a people pleaser from the Midwest, and so my instinct is just to do whatever anyone asks of me, whether that's like part of my job or not. And so, yeah, I don't have a good answer to that other than to say that like product management, because you're using so much empathy, is by default a bit more. There's just like a little more emotional capacity that you need to expand in that job than you would if you were just like an editor who might like have like a harsh, aggressive, stereotypical personality, but like the project manager or the product manager can't be like the jerk in the newsroom. That's like never going to be successful.
I think that the responsibility matrix really comes in handy here. I've found that when I've trusted people to take on the emotional work, and put them in a position where they know that they're responsible and accountable for something, that they do step up. And sometimes it means taking on more of a coaching and mentoring role and allowing someone who is not as good at this work, it's like to carry the conversation forward. But instead of jumping in to help, kind of taking that same amount of time that you would have used and using it to coach someone else on how to say like coaching a developer to go talk to someone on the editorial team about doing this work together, and how they can be the facilitator of that communication and creating that communication path instead of you. I still find myself doing a lot of emotional work in meetings to kind of guide conversations, and that's fine. But it's good whenever you can to like allow others to also exercise these skills and train them as best as you can. And it makes you feel like you're not taking on quite as much of the burden.
Any tips on how to define cultural changes and a SMART goal? I've got my team to be more self-motivated, take more initiative, but improving these kinds of soft skills is hard for me to measure. Ooh, that is a really good one. You could look at things like how many meetings are they hosting, or have they volunteered to lead a training or something, like kind of the like, what are they doing to be like a good citizen of the newsroom, is kind of how I always look at it. But yeah, measuring cultural impact in a newsroom is very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can define it through the work in some ways too. Like I have some employees who set goals around accomplishing fairly large scale projects or products and that are internal tools. And if they've successfully completed that, it means they've done the work that does have culture change kind of connected to it. Measuring soft skills is hard though. I think that's also just kind of like a one-on-one thing that you do as a manager. What other skills would you say journalists who want to transition to product management should try to refine? Should we take a data visualization course, like to code? I can answer this. So my background is that I helped form the data visuals team, co-founded it with Ryan Murphy at the Texas Tribune, and I taught myself how to code because I wanted to tell visual stories, and that's how I got into product management. I would say that you do not need to know how to code to be a product manager. You don't necessarily need to know how to build data visualizations to be a product manager. What you do need is the ability to understand tech speak and be able to communicate with people about the underlying technology that you need to use to build the things that you use on a day-to-day basis. But you don't yourself need to be an expert at everything. So I think a lot of times people who are successful product managers have dabbled in different parts of their organization and have a clear understanding of what those roles require, and then they can talk to people who do have that expertise and be able to suss it out so they can bring different kinds of expertise all together. What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, I agree. I think that like so I do not know how to code, right? I have some basic HTML and CSS, and I've done the like chapter 1 intro to Ruby, chapter 1 intro to Python, and have never made it any further beyond that. But I have like a good understanding of, I can usually tell what I'm looking at if I'm looking at code, whether it fits with the tech stack that I'm working in or not, right? So if I see something and it's a language that looks unfamiliar, or the syntax doesn't quite look like what I'm used to seeing. So an example of when you would use a skill is if you are looking at documentation, right? So a lot of times you'll be working with you're on a newsletter plugin, and you will go to look at, like, say, Sailthrough's documentation to say this is how to hook it up so that it talks to our API. And so the product manager then has to like look through the technical document of how to implement it so you can bring it back to your engineers and say, like, does this make sense for us? And so that is like an example where I think that like having some knowledge of how code works is very, very useful, but I do not think you need to like actually know how to code.
Yeah, I think it also helps, like, if you're doing a competitive review, saying you're trying to like pick a new platform to use or a new tool, being able to know enough about the underlying tech stack that you can talk to your engineers about, like, will this fit into the other products suite that we're already using? Will we be able to connect it to the tools that we're using, or will it be more complicated? And being able to like kind of suss out those questions is helpful. But you don't need to be an expert in JavaScript to do that or whatever. We have another follow-up from Zachary. Is there any way emotional work can be a SMART goal? That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that because, again, it's so hard to quantify. I can only think about doing a SMART goal like, I would like to take on less emotional work in the workplace, right? And then you would be like, specifically like, here are some examples of emotional labor that I'm currently doing. Here are about how often I'm doing them. Here are some situations that I could change my reaction or my behavior so that I am not asked to do these things quite as often.
Yeah, I think that if you're really finding that your team has a really disproportionate distribution of emotional labor, that you could set a goal that's kind of team based around getting people to help each other speak up in meetings. So it could be something like, at our daily stand-up, each person should contribute kind of this amount, or like should be able to offer their ideas a certain amount, or like some sort of quantity, or you could prompt people to ask each other questions. Say like, like throughout this conversation, I've been like, Emma, what do you think? You could set goals that kind of help you talk to your team about the ways in which they can do more of that kind of conversational prompting to bring out others' perspectives, or how to do more active listening or repeat backs where you repeat what the other person has said to validate that idea and like assure them that you heard or understood it properly. So you can start to talk about those things with your team and kind of teach these skills through setting goals that illuminate them. Emma, did we get another question?
Yeah, so I saw that Nia had a question about advocating for inclusivity in a newsroom setting, especially when people of color / people who are most impacted are not in leadership positions. And so this is a little outside the scope of the course. However, it is something that I write about quite frequently. So I'm going to drop a link into the chat, and then we'll make it available somehow through the course. It's 2 articles. One is that one you can share with your newsroom leadership about how to diversify your newsroom. And the second one is an article about how to be a better ally in the newsroom, so that even if you aren't the person who is like in a manager or leadership position, you can still contribute to making an inclusive newsroom and workplace.
Yeah, that's great. I think that that's a really important topic that all of our newsrooms should be talking about more.
Agreed. Any other questions last minute? Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
I also think that if you're really struggling with inclusivity in your newsroom, talking to higher ups about SMARTY goals, about how we start writing goals that include questions about how we're inclusive and equitable can be a good start. It's a way of ensuring that when you're defining what that vision of success looks like, you're thinking about inclusivity and how you're, you know, that is a measure of success, just like everything else. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. I hope you learned a lot, and we'll be checking in on the discussion forums. So please leave more questions, leave more thoughts, leave more ideas, and jump in when you can. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.